Hi, everybody. Welcome along to episode 113 of Percussion Discussion. As always, I'm going to ask to please check out our social media. You'll find us on Facebook, Instagram, and of course, our world famous YouTube channel. Please subscribe if you find a second. This way, you won't miss any of the upcoming interviews that we have, and there are plenty to come this way, so don't miss those. If you'd rather listen on the go, then the great news is all of our conversations are available in podcast form. You can download these from your favorite podcast providers. Please rate and review if you can find a few seconds. Always really helps to find other like-minded drummers who may enjoy the conversations. Anyway, on to today's guests. Yes, guests, plural. Two gentlemen who I've known for a few years now. Well, the first gentleman I'm going to talk about is Nigel Constable. Nigel is a fine drummer. He recently, I'll say recently, in the last couple of years, he wrote the Hayman book, all about that wonderful drum company. A very keen drummer as well. And he's collaborated along with Bob Henrit. Now, Bob doesn't really need any introductions, but he's going to get one. Bob has played for many fabulous British bands, including Argent and The Kinks, many, many more. I'm not going to go into too many details about that. But between the two of them, they produced this remarkable book, which kind of centers around Ivor Arbiter and the influence he's had on the UK drum industry. It's a wonderful book, and I'm really looking forward to getting the conversation underway. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome Nigel Constable and Bob Henrit. Bob, Nigel, thank you so much for being here with me today. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thanks for having us.
It's a pleasure. And I also have to say thank you for writing this wonderful, wonderful book that we have here, with a lovely illustration of a Carlton theatre kit, if I'm not mistaken, on the cover.
That's the one.
I'm sure everybody will know that, of course, if they've read the book. Maybe not so if they haven't. But this is honestly a really wonderful book. And I have to ask, why did you write the book? I mean, obviously, after reading it, you know why. But there's lots of people who will be watching or listening who'll go, well, what's the point of it? So why did you write it?
Okay, well, as far as I'm concerned, and I guess Nigel is the same, we couldn't stop ourselves. It had to be done. It had to come out. And I just want to get the story put down, so it is actually sitting somewhere. I don't know how Nigel feels about that, but there's a lot of, if you're not careful, you get on the web and you find stuff that is wrong. And I don't want that to happen. I want to actually put right what I think it should be put right.
Yeah, I mean,
there are various things like the Beatles drumhead, all that sort of thing. There's a lot of stuff out there which isn't the truth, and we've put that to rights in the latest book.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I mean, we did the Hayman Drum Book, and Bob seemed to be worried that I might not have anything to do. Once that was put to bed and published, and so he came up with this one, and undoubtedly there was a story there to be told, and it's been great fun putting it together, and it's a very pleasing outcome that I think we've got with it. We think it's a nice book. We think it looks good, and people tell us it reads well, and it's a good story. So there it is.
It's a fascinating read, and obviously, you know, it's not solely about Ivor Arbiter, but there's a large focus on him, and the man on the street, like myself, I didn't realize how much he'd influenced the UK drum industry from way back. So obviously, what was he like, Bob? You knew him firsthand, didn't you? What was he like as a character?
Oh, he was a character. You've actually summed it up. He was a character, and he was a very interesting person to work with. I mean, I did as you know, I did the Arbiter AT stuff, and I thought that Arbiter AT was just the most fantastic idea. Some of his ideas weren't fantastic, but that one I thought was rather good. But we now know, Nigel and I, that drummers are conservatives and Catholics with a small c. They don't like change, and so just because somebody's brought them out something that's going to change their lives and mean they can tune a drum in 2 seconds, doesn't mean to say that everybody in the world, every drummer in the world, is going to go for it. So that was a very interesting part of it. But as a guy, he was funny, and he was all of those things.
Yeah,
I mean,
I didn't have the pleasure of meeting him. I would have liked to have done so from all the various stories I've heard about, partly as producing this book and also in the Hayman book. What does seem to be a theme is that people that I've met that did know him generally said he took a shine to me, and that seemed to be the whole thing. If Ivor took a shine to you, you were okay. If you didn't, it was totally binary, and forget it, you know. And I would like to have met him, if only to have found out if I might have been one of those blessed people that he took a shine to.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, but he was a great person to be around, and he was the most enthusiastic person I've ever met. You know, sometimes wrongly enthusiastic, but for example, when we did the Arbiter AT set, we're all sitting, me and all of the salesmen are sitting round a table with Ivor, and we're chatting, and it was time to learn what color we needed to order for the new drums. So he said to me, Henrit, what colors sell? So I said, oh, that's easy, Ivor. Black, white, and a bit of natural wood. And he turned to all the salesmen. He said, is Henrit right? And they said, absolutely right, Ivor. He said, right, we'll have 15 red, 25 green, 30 blue. And he was very much somebody who liked to keep a dog and bark himself. So we ended up with some colors which are still out there, I can assure you. Anybody looking for a green one, a blue one?
Do you know what? I feel like I know him a lot better now, having read the book, and that's part of the joy of it. You really get inside what made him tick, and you know, that's a credit to the both of you, you know, for producing such a fine book. But he was a gentleman who wasn't afraid of taking risks, was he? I mean, I don't want to give too much of the book away, but Trixon, for example, importing 50 kits a month. Can you imagine a stocking commitment these days? So, well, you've got to buy 50 kits a month from us. It would never happen, would it?
It wouldn't. I mean, it's. I once asked him how many Speedfire kits were sold, and he said, "Oh, I don't know about." And he came up with an about like 20 odd a month. And I spoke to one of the guys who worked in the shop. It wasn't successful. And the guy in the shop, yeah, we did a couple a month. So, but I had a Speedfire kit, correction, and I really enjoyed having it. But mostly it was out on hire to the BBC, and I didn't use it much, although people liked the uniqueness of it for videos.
Of course.
And it was exactly the same with the Vistalite, but I know you haven't mentioned that, but it was Ivor was a very interesting chap, to say the least.
But I mean, that's risky business, isn't it? You know, importing that many. I believe, as I say, I don't want to give the secret to the book away, but you know, he got the Trixon deal, providing he brought in 50 kits a month. I mean, Nigel, do you agree that wouldn't happen in this day?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, he was obviously a risk taker. He was a classic sort of retailer, in as much as he was prepared to try something, and if it worked, great. If it didn't work, well, chuck that aside and move on, kind of thing. And I imagine also that he was a retailer that if the commitments he had made couldn't quite be honoured, I would imagine he didn't have too much compunction about talking his way out of it either.
That was very diplomatic, Nigel.
I try sometimes.
Yeah, that was good.
I can do it when I try, Bob.
But you know, another risk, you know, solely responsible for bringing Pearl over to the UK, which I had no idea about. But he put the graft in. He went over to the factory and he wanted to see what he was buying and bringing over. Again, another risk, but you know, amazing.
Yeah, he was a risk taker, and most people these days in music or in music retailing, musical instruments is not that risk taker anymore. You know, if somebody asks you how many you wanted, you say, oh, maybe 5, maybe 4, but there he is committing to far more than that. And of course, with respect, I don't know how many he did sell.
Of course.
But I always thought the story of Karl-Heinz Weimar throwing the foot pedal at him, and Ivor was complaining about something was going wrong with the quality. And so he was complaining about it, and as far as Karl-Heinz was concerned, the only way to do all this was to buy more drums. And as he said, buy more drums, he threw one of those big tricks and foot pedals at Ivor. And fortunately, it didn't hit him, because it would definitely have been a very bad moment.
Wow. Just
but of course, he brought Ludwig into the country, and that is a story in itself. When they were looking for a deal with Ludwig for Ringo, Ludwig said, who is this Ringo Starr? And they said, oh, he's in a band called the Beatles. And he said, is he as good as Joe Morello? Well, he is as good as Joe Morello in a completely different way.
Yeah, absolutely.
But of course, Ivor was capable of fielding that question, to the apparent satisfaction of Bill Ludwig, and it kind of all worked out, and it was great. And one of the other things that comes to mind is, this is also a little thread that runs through the book, that there was this lifelong enmity that Ivor had with Premier. And when it came to it, and there was the chance actually to acquire Premier, I think he was happy to look at it, and then very pleased to turn it down. It'd be fair to say he had a memory, wouldn't it, Bob?
Yes, he bore a grudge. I
was trying to be diplomatic again there.
If you were on his, you mentioned this at the beginning, Nigel. If you were on his bad side, you were on his bad side, and there was no way back. I was thinking to myself earlier, I've never had a Ludwig. I've never had a Premier kit, and I've seen a great many, and I've reviewed a great many, but I've never had one.
I've got 2 in the garage.
Oh, have you?
Yeah.
Is that Ivor's influence, do you think, rubbing off on you, Bob?
I don't know. I was looking at the list. I've had an awful lot of drum kits. There was a time when I had 35 drum kits in my loft when we were living in North London. And I actually was concerned that the roof was going to fall in and all the drums were going to end up on the bedroom floor below them. And so I began to be concerned about, I had 55 snare drums and 35 drum kits, which is bloody stupid. I mean, there's no doubt about it. It's crazy. But I was in a position to buy them in America and bring them home. If we were touring with the Kinks, I could, believe it or not, I could just say, I've got a drum kit I just bought, can you bring it back to England? And the drum tech would. So that was rather an easy way to do it. But as I said, I've never actually owned a Premier drum kit, but I've had lots and lots of snare drums.
Yeah.
I think I've had all the snare drums over the years.
Well, who knows? It might well be a little bit of Ivor influence there. He's subliminally, got through to you. Who knows?
Well, I'd like to think there was an excuse, but this was long before Ivor. I mean,
thinking back on this, when I first started playing in 1972, I'm not sure really that Premier was the coolest brand around.
Oh, absolutely not.
So if you had aspirations, to sort of play anything that was vaguely rocky, I don't think Premier was where you looked at the time. Where you did look, oddly enough, at that time, and that's what turned me on to him, was Hayman.
Yes.
Because that was the kit to have.
Well, Simon Kirk
at the time. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. there you go, amongst many others. I mean, at that time you couldn't put Top of the Pops on, without seeing a Hayman kit
Mm.
in somebody's hands. And I think it would be fair to say that Premier reacted to the fact that their product was kind of looking a bit kind of dated, and they reacted in sort of some style and a lot of substance. And their products changed over the years without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I went up to do a review for International Musician of the Premier electronic kit, if you remember it. I don't know if anybody does.
I
I
don't.
think it's well remembered, that one, Bob.
It didn't last for long, but I went up to see it and I reviewed it. And away in a corner in the drum-shaped factory was a very small drum kit, which was cream-colored with gold fittings, and it was absolutely delectable. I mean, I thought I've got to have one of these. I didn't actually do it in the end, but it looked so fabulous. So they were capable of doing it if they wanted to. It's just that it wasn't fashionable. And drums are run in fashion. Yeah, as I said earlier, they're conservatives with a small c. That's what they do. We drummers.
It's well, if you don't mind, right? It's going to give a little secret away from the book, but do you mind sharing where the dislike of Premier started? Because I think it's a really funny little story, this. And I laughed out loud when I read it, and I thought, I can't believe this 50 years of hatred for Premier has come from this.
Yeah, Ivor's father was a jazz musician, or a dance band musician, let's call him for accuracy. And he had a shop in Charing Cross Road, not too far from where Drum City was. It was called Paramount. And his dad wanted to get Premier drumsticks, and Premier refused to supply him because they, as far as he was concerned, or as Premier was concerned, he wasn't big enough to have their drumsticks, which is bloody stupid, I mean. And so they didn't allow him to, and the hatred began right there. It's just ridiculous, isn't it?
I literally, I was in a gig and it was a pretty quiet time. People were talking, and I literally laughed out loud when I read that, and whatever I was drinking came out of my nostrils, and it was
It's not a good, Matty. It's not a good look, is it?
not at all. But it was thoroughly justified after reading that, I have to say. I mean, the book is full of beautiful little anecdotes and stories, and what's nice. You go through all the different brands, that have been over here in the UK that have been associated with Ivor. And how I have to ask, how long did this take with all the research and everything? It must have been quite a task.
Well, most of it takes a lifetime. That's the point. And we got at it together, Nigel and I, and that was that. It was done. But I'm making it sound
yeah, after a while it was done. I actually started to put it together. It was I remember it well. It was Christmas 2016, because I was in Tenerife over that particular Christmas. I remember sitting on the balcony in the hotel room, putting these bits and pieces together, and it started there. And it took a while to get it all together and to get it into the shape it is. But
it's a huge project, isn't it? I mean, there's no doubt about it. And that's the reason for writing it, in my humble opinion, simply because I want the information to be there, and I know you want the information to be freely available. I mean, there's a lot of drum books, dare I say, that are got wonderful pictures, but where's the story?
I do think that is a good point. We've got some good pictures in there, but we've got a story that links it all together. There are drum books around, really, that are nothing but grabs from catalogues, and maybe a bit of linking text. We didn't want to produce a book that was like that. We wanted it to be a proper read as well as something that's actually quite nice to pick up and leaf through.
It is, and that was one of the questions. What makes this different to other books? And I think you've just answered that, really well. And the thing is, there's such a huge interest in the vintage drum, history these days. It's a surefire winner, isn't it? It must be, because it's got everything you could ever want in there.
Well, thank you for that. Yes, we, as I said earlier, we wanted it to be accurate, and that accuracy takes time. Anybody, I mean, the thing is, if you go into Wikipedia, you'll find something that Nigel and I have written. So, I'm without even anybody mentioning it to us. But I'm of the opinion that maybe I should write something wrong and see how far it goes.
Do you know what? It's sad. You should have a certain qualification to be able to do the Wikipedia thing, because anybody can go in and change anything, can't they? Which is quite,
They can, yeah.
you know.
Well, I mean, it was one of the reasons that I started off on the Hayman book, because I looked at Wikipedia and there was stuff in there. I thought, oh, I know that's not right, but I couldn't find anything better.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, let's create something better. And Crash Bang Wallop is a extension of that kind of thinking, but on a broader base. Yeah, I mean, there's the Ivor link that goes through it, but we were also careful, and I think we dealt with that mostly in the chapter we called The Ones That Got Away, to recognise the fact there were a number of brands, including Premier and people like Rose Morris, for example, that dear old Ivor didn't have anything to do with, but they were equally important in the development of drums, in that period, really from the late 50s through to the millennium, which is pretty much the segment of time that the book seeks to address.
Absolutely.
I think we could say, Nigel, if they weren't Ivor's friends, they were his enemies. It was pretty black and white, you know, and he was there, you know, he was fighting them and they were fighting him as far as he was concerned. But it was a jolly nice time. And as we discussed once before, going up to the West End and seeing what was in the shop, in the drum shop or in the music shop windows, was very much part of our growing up. That's what we did,
wasn't it? You know, I mean, if you've got reason to go to the West End. It was mandatory to go around Shaftesbury Avenue and the associated area and gaze in the windows at all these things which I couldn't afford, but I liked looking at them.
Yeah.
Just the same, it was spectacular in those days, and it's a shame it's gone. And another thing I hope is that, because we do actually sort of cover that sort of particular area of town in the book. I hope it gives a sense of what that was like, with so many drum shops being around the Shaftesbury Avenue and Charing Cross Road area. It was fantastic back in the day, and I'm sorry we've lost it.
Yeah, I'm sure most drummers are. I mean, when we heard, you and I, that just before the book was ready to come out, what had happened to Foots, we were so sad, because the last link with drum shops in the West End had gone.
Yeah.
And as far as we know, they aren't going to come back.
Yeah, absolutely.
We don't need drum shops anymore. We need TV screens.
Sad, isn't it?
It's awful. I mean, it's the very last bit of the book. We talk about the fact that the demise of Foots.
Yeah. And that's a shop with some fair old backing behind it as well, from a certain drummer. We won't name him, but we all know who he is. And it's
Floyd,
yes, absolutely.
No, I thought he was very brave, and I now know that Nico. Well, we've known for quite some time what Nico is up to with the shop in Manchester.
Drum One, yes.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about. When we had a drum store in Wardour Street, the next step was going to be another shop elsewhere, but that's a risk in itself. But certainly what's going on in Manchester is a very brave step at the moment, to say the least.
Yeah.
So well done, Nico.
Indeed, yeah, and I've been in there many times, and I know Craig Buckley very well too, and they're running a very tight ship there, lots of stock. But one of the questions I was going to ask was, obviously, there's some great pictures of Drum City in the book. What was it like? Was it, on your average day in there, would it be? We all know these days you go in a drum shop, and if you find 5 people on a Saturday milling about, it's quite a steady day. Back in the day, was it busy all the time, or how was it? What was the feel like in there?
Well, Drum City was always very busy, and as was Drum Store, which was, of course, what we needed. And punk came along, and the guys would come in, bless them, and they'd say, "Got any second-hand drumsticks? Got any second-hand drum heads?" And we, we weren't used to that. We were used to people coming in and buying drum sets, new ones, all shiny, and we would load them in their cars for them. So that was something that happened. But Drum Store actually had, for better or for worse, had a bar downstairs. And we were very interested in, I know it sounds ridiculous, but we were very interested in the situation where drummers would come in to chat. We wanted it to be a hangout. That's what we wanted. And it worked. Of course, we needed to sell something other than secondhand drumsticks and secondhand drum heads. But it was a very interesting time. And whatever else punk did, it made a lot of the gigs where nobody could play anymore, youth clubs and things like that. It made them happening again.
Yeah.
So of course we're very pleased with that.
Of course.
But Drum Store was just down the road from Marquee Studios.
Yeah.
And every now and again we'd get a record producer running in, ready to pull his head off. And he'd say, "I've got any drummers in here?" And we'd say, "Yes, of course we have. We're all drummers. It's a drum shop." And he said, "Well, the drummer that I'm recording has decided that he's done it once and he ain't going to do it again. So sorry about this accent, but that was my view of it." And so he said, "Can anybody come and do a session?" So whoever was available in Drum Store would run down Wardour Street into the Marquee and play on this on whatever record it was. We never knew. We had no idea who we were. We knew it wasn't the Sex Pistols, but that was about as far as it was. And they liked us because we could play loud and fast and as many times as they wanted, which a lot of the punks were more interested in getting down to the ship and having a drink, which we were as well, I suppose. So it was
how times have changed. It's very different. Everything's different these days, isn't it? And not for the best, I don't think, personally, but you know.
Well, I mean, you have to be a bit sanguine about this, Matty, because there was a time when our parents hated what we loved, and that's what sort of occurred.
Yeah.
And so I'm really pleased to be still doing it, you know, and I'm now over 21, believe it or not.
Hard to believe, but yeah. But you know, there's a few things in the book which I really enjoyed. I enjoyed all of it, but there was a few bits. Now, nobody ever talks about drum stools ever, but in the was it the Dallas Arbiter section? You kind of do like a side note on drum stools, which I've never seen anything about drum stools.
That came about because Bob and I got into a bit of dialogue, and this was because he'd written something saying that Carlton had invented a drum stool, and I said, "Well, there can't be anything very special about that, can there, Bob? You know, drum stools have been around forever." And so I got a kind of, well, let me tell you how it is or how it was, and then from that sort of came that whole story about the evolution of the humble stool.
Yeah, I mean, you often see photographs of drummers sitting on their trap case, on the edge of their trap case, so it's the right height. And that was from the 20s on. And you would have thought that the lowly drum stool would have been around a lot longer than it was.
Yeah.
And certainly the drum stool, but they actually had a bit that went on a chair. So you had a bentwood chair, and you put this this bit that you could carry on top of that, and you were the right height to play the drums.
The things I've never been able to understand is why anyone wanted one of those canister thrones, which were a fixed height, unless it happened to suit your particular anatomy and the height you liked to set the kit. They must have been a disaster, but that's
DW got the idea, and because it was good because you can put bits of stands and everything in it and carry it to the gig. But they got involved with it, and DW made it adjustable. So all of a sudden there was a reason for it, and that's because of DW doing it. But the worst, as we know, and anybody who's listening knows, the worst drum stall ever was the one from Premier, which had 3 legs, one of which was the middle bit, and which you could fall off very, very easily.
The
And
Premier 245.
yeah, it's written on my bottom.
Mine too.
Is that the one with the red stool top, or was it the black?
It didn't matter, Matty. It didn't matter. None of them worked.
No, they had the same base, regardless of whether it had the red top or whether it had the thing that was like a bicycle saddle.
Oh, yes.
And the other thing that used to happen to it was that there was this wing nut that held the whole thing together in the centre. And after a gig, the thing would invariably sort of lock up. And I developed a very neat technique where I used to be able to drop it on the edge of a stage, hit the side of the wing nut, and then it would spring open.
Yeah, I don't know how many trapped fingers I've had as well, trying to collapse those things over the years. So yeah,
that's the Hayman problem, Matty, where you couldn't do the tom-tom holder without crushing everything.
Yeah,
I say everything, but your thumbs, your fingers, your hands.
Well, that's how it developed its nickname, wasn't it? In the end, I think, wasn't it?
Knuckle Crusher.
Knuckle Crusher, yeah.
But yeah, I'm of the view that the single one's all right. It's the double one that's the trouble.
Yeah.
Well, of course, I'm talking to a real Hayman. What's the word? Aficionado. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's a polite way of putting it.
Yes. But, it's a wonderful book, and I genuinely think people are going to really enjoy it. And it's not just a book for the older guys, the one who remembered it. I mean, I'm 50 this year. I am classed as older now, maybe, but I love the vintage stuff alongside all the new stuff, and I just enjoy reading about the rich history we've got over here in the UK. And who knows? Without Ivor Arbiter, who knows where our drum industry would be today? And it's a valid point.
It is exactly. That's the interesting thing is, I mean, there's a bit in at the back of the book where I didn't ask the question, but most people have no idea why there's an air hole in a drum. And it turns out that the truth is that there's an air hole in the drum to let the air in, not to let the air out. Everybody thinks, so the air escapes, but it's not. And the reason that the air hole was there is that it let the air in and it dried the drum head that was on there, the vellum drum head, the animal skin, and it dried it while it was on its way to wherever it had been sold to. So everybody thinks, it's because that's where the air comes out. Well, no, it doesn't. It's where the air goes in.
Me included, I have to say. I'll put my hands up to that.
Well, that's what Nigel and I wanted to do. I mean, it is showing off. Of course, it's showing off, but in my case, it's 67 years worth of showing off. But don't get me started.
I honestly, I wish you all the best success with this, because it is a fabulous book, and you can see the work and the love that's gone into it as well, and that's important, isn't it? It's not just throwing together things. You've lived it, both of you, and it's a passion as well, isn't it? It's not just words.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I alluded to it earlier. All these drums in the loft, I decided it was absolutely, I was just being selfish by not letting anybody see them. I mean, Alan Buckley's a bit the same. You go and see his drums and you can't get in where they are. So sorry, Alan, but that's what it is. Or is it Sir Alan? Anyway, so I decided that I was being too selfish and I should do something about it. So I spoke to Lou Dias, the Supreme. I said, Lou, I'm getting rid of everything. And he said, okay, I'll come round. And he came round with a great big van and he took everything I had. And then I felt better because it was now out in the world, and so all this stuff which I'd struggled to find was now being seen. But a lot of it found its way into Alan Buckley's shed.
Of course it did. And have you seen any of it around and about? Obviously, we're all fairly regular at Simon John's Vintage Drum Fair every October. So do you ever see any of it coming through?
Yeah, I went to one of those very early on when it first began, and Alan had a stand there, And I looked at, and I'm looking at all my drums. So whether he bought, maybe Lou Dyer said, "Look, I've got some drums. I'll bring them round," and brought everything round there. But drums should be appreciated and seen. There's, you know, that whole James Bond thing where he goes into a museum owned by a criminal in Japan, and all these stolen paintings are there, and you know, and I don't want to do. I didn't want to do that. I wanted them to be seen, and there was a reason why. It was a reason why I bought them, and this was. I felt everybody should see it, like egg-shaped drums. I mean, that. Oh, it's in the book, isn't it? The egg-shaped drums.
It is.
Very weird.
Weird and wonderful.
Who knows where that drum kit is?
Well, if anybody does know, obviously, you know the gentleman to get in touch with. Now, possibly, most importantly of all, where can we get the book from, gentlemen?
Well, you can go to Libri Publishing's website, which is libripublishing.co.uk, and do a search on Crash Bang Wallop. And you can also find it on other well-known websites such as Amazon.
Oh, so
and I discovered the other day you can go to Foyles and get it, which is rather good. So Foyles actually have copies as we speak.
Excellent stuff. So
wonderful.
So there's no excuses for not going out.
I was going to tell you now. You know, Foyles have Foyles have actually got some, and I went into my local shop to see where it was available, and they told me, and Foyles is one of them.
Fabulous.
It's, for our generation, if it's in Foyles, it's happening.
Perfect. Well, look, there's the book, and it's a fascinating read. It's not it's a book I like to. I don't want to do it in one sitting because I don't retain the information very well. If I read a section at a time, then it tends to stay with me. So it's thoroughly enjoyable. I recommend everybody go and buy a copy and enjoy it as much as I have. So
give it a flip through the pages so people can see the wonderful pictures and illustrations that we've got in there, Matty.
I shall try and do this. Okay, let's find some. All I'm seeing is text now. Look, there we go. There's the part of the premiere. There's some. What's that? The panel. Oh, Beverly. Yeah. Let's see. Oh, some of the AT stuff. Yes. Let's get closer to the front. There's some Rogers. What have we got? Well, it's literally everything, and I certainly recognise those drums. Hayman, and yes, we this honestly, I can't recommend it enough. I really, really can't. And you know, give it a read, enjoy it. It's a great present idea for a drummer, isn't it? Let's be honest. You know, if somebody's got a birthday coming up, then that's the book to have. And
even if you haven't,
yeah, just buy it anyway.
Father's Day.
Yes.
Is that coming up, or have I missed it?
No,
we haven't it yet.
June, I think, isn't it?
It's a good time.
Absolutely. Well, look, Bob, Nigel, thank you so much for spending the time with me today, and of course, writing this wonderful book. It's appreciated. So I hope it does very well for you, and hopefully, I'll catch you up at the Vintage Drum Fair this year.
You will definitely. And thanks for your time, Matty.
You will. Good.
Yeah.
Excellent stuff. It's an absolute pleasure.
Okay,
thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks a lot.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.